I feel relatively excited about this quote here. So Samuel Adams, this is a speech delivered in Philadelphia in August of 1776. He says, "Truth loves an appeal to the common sense of mankind." And in my mind, as I read that, like many things, it's easy just to go over it. Ooh, cool, nice poetic statement. This is something that, or this type of thing is something common to the political writers of this time. They're going through a revolution. Everything is super hyped up. Very, like I said, poetic, romantic. But there is certainly a deep understanding here. First and foremost, he says, truth loves. Not mankind loves. The sense of truth that is independent and that it can love. And it loves the appeal to the common sense of mankind. Common sense is another interesting thing. In our society, I think common sense is it's been broken down into the individual. And I can imagine a scenario where somebody might say, well, this is just common sense. Where is your common sense? There's a lack of common sense. And all of these, even though the words might suggest differently, I think the suggestion in the modern day is that the common sense is sort of individualistic, that the sense making is of the individual, an emergent sort of thing that comes out into the society, rather than perhaps the reverse or the combination of the two, the emanation and emergent quality of what is comprised of being the common sense of mankind. Moreover from that, we have to question, what is the common sense? If there is a sense, and what is a sense? It could be our cognition. It could be the state of being. Senses, obviously, on a basic level, are things like vision, hearing, vestibular sensation, proprioception, our ability to perceive where we are in space. That leads to a certain type of, that we call these things senses, right? But if you build on that, there's a different type of sense. There's a sense that is in the cognitive domain. It is the sense that there is an individual. But then when we introduce the common, it is this relationship between the individual and the collective. And what does it mean for the collective to share some sort of sense-making that is separate from this base level of the visual, of the purely perceptual? Of course, this is something that we all share, so it is common. And based on that commonality, based on all the information that we gather, it is common. We all understand this experience. But I think this quote, "Truth loves an appeal to the common sense of mankind," truth in one sense can be boiled down to the raw material, the observable, the empirical. But there is this other level which suggests this independent truth of us, and a common sense that is this cognitive sense, the higher level sense, not just the base visual, vestibular, proprioceptive hearing. And when we get into this level, I think we're talking about liberty. We're talking about justice. We're talking about right and wrong. We're talking about the soul of man. Even he mentions mankind, the collective, the us, the moreness to life. I just thought this was a very interesting thing here. I have yet to read beyond this sentence, but if I was to continue here into uncharted territory, he goes on to say, your unperverted understanding can best determine on subjects of a practical nature. The positions and plans which are said to be above the comprehension of the multitude may always be suspected to be visionary and fruitless. He who made all men has made the truth necessary to human happiness obvious to all. Okay, so let's continue and unpack this here. So we've went over truth loves and appeal to the common sense of mankind. The next sentence, your unperverted understandings can best determine on subjects of a practical nature. So your unperverted understanding. To pervert something is to change it, to make it less than, to have a certain corruptible influence on. And so to have this corruptible influence on an understanding, and to have it unperverted, it leaves it clean, it leaves it fresh. And in this state, it is best, it's at its optimum, to determine subjects of a practical nature. The next sentence, the positions and plans which are said to be above the comprehension of the multitude may be always suspected to be visionary and fruitless. This is interesting. The positions and plans which are said to be above the comprehension of the multitude. So, a position and plan that's beyond the multitude, beyond the comprehension of us. It could imply a God, it could imply an authority figure. May be always suspected to be visionary and fruitless. The romanticism, the feeling, the excitement, the manic phase of a manic bipolar person, perhaps. He who made all men, God, has made the truths necessary to human happiness above all. Okay, so now we get into it. So God has made the truth necessary to human happiness obvious to all. So, matters of a practical nature, unperverted understanding, this is common sense. An unperverted understanding makes us more apt to determine subjects of a practical nature. He who made all men has made the truths necessary to human happiness above all. And so, how interesting is this in a country that prides himself on the separation of church and state? At its founding is so godly. This is beyond the secularism that we say is infused in our government is there for good reason. But no one can deny the godliness, the faithfulness of the founding fathers of this country. I mean, how poetic is this? Our forefathers threw off the yoke of popery in religion. For you is reserved the leveling of popery of politics. So, let me read that again. Our forefathers threw off the yoke of popery in religion. For you is reserved the leveling, the popery of politics. They opened the Bible to all and maintained the capacity of every man to judge for himself in religion. Are we sufficient for the comprehension of the sublimest spiritual truths, and unequal to material and temporal ones. Interesting. So, even though I screwed up that initial sentence there, our forefathers threw off the yoke of popery in religion. So, the supreme head of the church, the mouthpiece of God, the emanation. Then he says, so we threw that off. Then he says, for you is reserved the leveling, the popery of politics. So now we are the judges of politics, the mouthpiece of truth, which we get from God, and we infuse it into our politics through the consent of the governed. They open the Bible to all and maintain the capacity of every man to judge for himself in religion. So, again, it's not the arbitrary authority that makes the decision. However, even though we are responsible now for making the decision, it doesn't mean that the truth is lost or that the truth is the individual or the subject creates his own truth. The truth is still out there for us to grab. And in a faithful society, in a traditional society, this is something that is common among all. They all recognize this truth. Are we sufficient for comprehension of the sublimest spiritual truths, and unequal to material and temporal ones? So another interesting sentence here. Are we sufficient for the comprehension of the sublimest spiritual truths, and unequal to material and temporal ones? So, if we are to throw off the yoke of the popery, can we handle it? Can we handle the spiritual truths? Heaven has trusted us with the management of things for eternity, and man denies us ability to judge of the present, or to know from our feelings the experience that will make us happy. Heaven has trusted us with the management of things for eternity. Powerful. And man denies us ability to judge of the present, or to know from our feelings the experience that will make us happy. Again, heaven has trusted us with the management of things for eternity. Okay? We are not gods, but we are entrusted with the management of things, of this sort of material existence. And man denies us the ability to judge of the present, or to know from our feelings the experience that will make us happy. So again, I think this is relating to the arbitrariness that he spoke about in the beginning of the paragraph of this popery. Our forefathers threw off the yoke of the popery in religion. This independence. Again, not complete liberation of the individual to the point where the subjective is all that is, and there is truth within every subject. Again, there is still common sense. There is truth out there, but it's the arbitrariness of man and his authority over other men that we deny, unless we consent to it. You can discern, say they, objects distant and remote, but cannot perceive those within your grasp. Okay, so this is a kind of a tough one for me, but I think I might have it here. So, you can discern, they say, say they, objects distant and remote, but cannot perceive those within your grasp. Let us have the distribution of present goods, and cut out and manage as you please the interests of futurity. Okay, so back to that original sentence. You can discern, say they, objects distant and remote, but cannot perceive those within your grasp. Okay, so who is they, first and foremost? And obviously he's talking to, in this analogy, let's assume me, the person that's speaking. I am able to discern. And they are perhaps they're the people in the previous sentence that have denied us the ability to judge of the present, or to know from our feelings the experience that will make us happy. Say they, objects distant and remote, but cannot perceive those within your grasp. And then he says, let us have the distribution of present goods, and cut out and manage as you please the interests of futurity. So it's almost like a conversation between, I feel like, at least, it could be a misinterpretation, but this is one idiot trying to make sense of it, fulfilling my civic responsibility, so don't judge too harshly. It sounds like this person is having a conversation with something above him, an institution, an organization, the state, perhaps, an entity that is more than, and he's making a bargain of sorts. He's saying, okay, I can handle the distribution of the present goods, and I can cut out, let me read that again. Let us have the distribution of present goods, and cut out and manage as you please the interests of the future. Okay, so in terms of that longevity, even though we're a secular government, we're leaving this to you. You take care of our posterity or our future generations. To continue here, this day, I trust, the reign of political Protestantism will commence. Okay, so here this cuts quite deep. This cuts all the way to the Protestant Reformation. Okay, he says, this day, I trust, the reign of political Protestantism will commence. I think this is a bit out of my league here. I've more reading to do on exactly what that means, but I have a bit of a sense, but I don't want to embarrass myself and talk at this moment about that. So, we have explored the temple of royalty. This is cool. I haven't even read the sentence yet, and it sounds cool. We have explored the temple of royalty, and found that the idol we have bowed down to has the eyes which see not, ears that hear not our prayers, and a heart like the nether millstone. Damn. That's crazy. We have explored the temple of royalty. Seem to imply here monarchy, aristocracy, and found that the idol we have bound down to has the eyes which see not. So they're not as wise as they thought they were. Ears that hear not. So again, going back to that perception that I was talking about earlier, the monarchy, the king, the queen, we've said, okay, we're giving you our eyes, our ears, hear for us and see for us, perceive this reality for us, emanate what God has given to our reality, and give it to us. And here, Sam Adams is saying, yeah, that didn't work. We tried it. And a heart like nether millstone. I'm not really sure what that means. Okay, so apparently it's sort of an analogy, an allusion to something that is hard and unyielding. Okay, which would make sense, is sort of consistent with what he was saying. So to continue here, we have this day restored, sovereign, restored the sovereign, to whom alone men ought to be obedient. He reigns in heaven. Wow, that's powerful, man. I mean, he's saying that, okay, we've tried the aristocracy. We tried the guy or the gal that's going to be the eyes and ears to see the truth, to bring in God to us. Again, like this emanatory thing. But like in the experience with the colonists that are having in the 18th century, it didn't turn out that way. It turned out to be just like any other institution. You give it enough time, it corrupts itself, it devolves, even in such a rich culture that England had at the time with, the culture of law, of respecting private property, of sovereignty of the individual, everything sort of decays. And so again, we have this day restored, the sovereign, to whom alone men ought to be obedient. That's God. And he reigns in heaven, and with propitious eyes behold his subjects, assuming that freedom of thought and dignity of self-direction which he bestowed on them. From the rising to the setting sun, may his kingdom come. Man, the beauty in this, and this is not even a full page that I'm reading here. And I started like on the third paragraph. He reigns in heaven, and with a propitious eye beholds his subjects, assuming that freedom of thought and dignity of self-direction which he bestowed on them. From the rising to the setting sun, may his kingdom come.